Hare
Hare
Krishna.
Krishna Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna, everyone. So let's wait for a couple of minutes. Still, I think that. So let us start with the prayers. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udirayet Nashtaprayeshu Vadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama-shloke Bhaktir-bhavati Naishtiki Krishnaya Vasudevaya Devaki Nandanaya Cha Nandagopakumaraya Govindaya Namo Namaha Om Ajnana-timirandhasya Jnana-anjana-chalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupaha Kada Mahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guroho Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagarjatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sagana Dalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha हे कृष्ण करुणा सिंधु दीनबंधु जगतपते गोपेशा गोपिका कांत राधा कांत नमोस्तुते तप्त कांचन गौरांगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी शुभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये वंशकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर विवासादि गौरभक्तवृंद हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे ओम विष्णुपादाय कृष्ण पृष्ठाय कृष्ण विष्णुपादाय कृष्ण पृष्ठाय श्रीमते भक्ति वेदांत स्वामी नामे नमस्ते सरस्वती गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देशताय मुखम गुरुति वाचालं पंगुम लंघयते गिरिं यत्कृपातमहं वन्दे श्रीगुरुं दीनतारिणं परमानंद माधव श्री चैतन्य ईश्वरम् हरि ओम तत्सत् हरे कृष्ण. So we are continuing our discussion of the wonderful instructions of Bharat Maharaj to Maharaj Rahugana. The Srimad Bhagavatam is full of so many conversations where great self-realized souls are instructing great kings. Now, why these conversations are considered especially important? Of course, there are two reasons. At one place in the Bhagavad, it is said that the stories of great kings are used. Of course, they are real historical episodes, but they are picked up as against so many other individuals who may have been instructed. So stories of kings, because of the opulence and the power that a king is associated with, whenever we talk about a king, everyone becomes very excited to hear. Correct? From a couple of thousand years down the line, somebody says, "Oh, at one time, one great soul was talking to one Gaur Chandra Das, stayed in loft condominium. It's, we'll say, can we discuss something else? So, no, there was another conversation where the same great soul spoke to the Prime Minister of Malaysia. Can you speak on that topic? That sounds interesting and exciting. So the nature of the people in this world is wherever there is opulence and power, people become interested in their life, in hearing about them. Of course, Kali Yuga, people's tendencies to get interested in all unnecessary things also. But amongst them, when it is related to individuals of power and opulence. So that is one reason. People become interested. Oh, this king also heard. So must be if a powerful, opulent king who is considered the epitome of material success, because how can you be higher than a king in this world for a materialistic person? If he is hearing and this is what happened to him, I want to hear. So that is one reason. And the other reason is for the society at large to undergo a spiritual transformation, or for the society at large to have a sustained environment where spiritual values are protected, spiritual culture is protected, spiritually advanced people are protected. It is very important that the political leadership of that particular country, in other words, king, because in today's time it could be president, prime minister, whatever, but that the king should be a saintly person. And what does saintly mean here? Saintly in the sense that he understands what is the real purpose of human form of life. And he's himself endeavoring for that, and he makes sure that he rules his kingdom in such a way that all those who are in his kingdom, he facilitates the creation and maintenance of an environment based on spiritual values, where cows and brahmanas are protected. Brahmanas means spiritually elevated. Namo brahmanya devaya brahmanya hitaya. That's very important. Sometimes some people complain, oh, why are we? Sometimes we see that we give so much importance to distinguished, powerful people in a community of devotees. One of the reasons for that, of course, we can look at it from various perspectives, but one of the reasons for that is when intelligent, powerful, capable people become devotees. Yadyad acharta shreshas tattadevitarajan. So many others would follow. For example, when George Harrison, the famous Beatles singer, and he was also a guitar player, but one of the leaders of the band, George Harrison, very famous, one of the most famous bands in the history, Western history. He became a devotee. He came to Prabhupada and he said, oh, I'm involved in all these materialistic things. I want to give up and I want to just chant Hare Krishna. Prabhupada discouraged him. He said, you are such a talented person, such a good musician, and so many people look up to you. And I'm paraphrasing this. Prabhupada didn't necessarily say it in these words. I'm trying to include the spirit of Prabhupada's instructions. I'm just paraphrasing it. Prabhupada essentially told him that you can serve Krishna better by continuing to be a singer in the Beatles group and use your immense popularity to induce the people at large towards Krishna consciousness, which he did. Came up with so many special albums, and his song My Sweet Lord and Hare Krishna Temple album. He came up with quite a few songs and albums which are connected to Krishna consciousness and became so famous. Hare Krishna became a household name in US and UK because of there was a significant contribution of George Harrison. Yad yad acharate shreshta. Whoever are considered extraordinary people in society, when they take up to Krishna consciousness, everyone is excited. Of course, we don't necessarily have to be that great, but the point is, each one of us, we have a sphere of influence. We have a group of people who consider us a hero in some way, hero, heroine, right? Whatever our gender is. Of course, nowadays there are so many genders, but I'm just talking about what scriptures talk about as genders. So each of us is looked up to in our own environment based on whatever position. Maybe just in our family, maybe in our condominium, maybe the community, maybe at our workplace, maybe in a certain group of individuals, a group of friends. So whenever we become Krishna conscious and we demonstrate extraordinary character and good qualities, it naturally becomes a preaching because it becomes a automatic attraction for those who look up to us to get attracted towards Krishna consciousness. And that is one of the reasons we want leaders, powerful people, prominent people, celebrities to take up to Krishna consciousness. Some of them may not be able to take up to Krishna consciousness in the same way that we ordinary sadhakas do because they have a very different lifestyle. But just these leading personalities expressing faith in Krishna, if they are seen visibly chanting the holy names, appreciating devotees, makes such a huge impact on society. Perhaps Bharat Maharaj may have preached to so many others. It's not mentioned here. I would think so. Because as Jad Bharat, maybe not, but maybe, at an earlier time. But this conversation is picked up. Of course, not only is the conversation profound, but the whole episode is very interesting because of the background of the character Rahugana and how this whole conversation came. So we concluded chapter 12, our last conversation. At the end of chapter 12, after answering various questions which Maharaj Rahugana had given, Jada Bharat, he summarized to him his spiritual instructions by telling him that two things are very important. You must become detached from material existence, and you must develop attachment to saintly devotees. Tasman naro asanga susanga jata. Sangha means association of devotees, and naro asanga means detachment from ordinary materialistic association. If you do that, if you regularly associate with devotees and don't mix with materialistic people beyond what you just need to, what will happen? You will be able to cultivate transcendental knowledge by which you will be able to sharpen the sword of knowledge. Unless you have a sharp sword, you cannot cut through illusion. And as you cut through that illusion, you will be able to, with great firm faith and determination. Take shelter of the process of the devotional service. Surrender to the Lord through the process of chanting the holy names and rendering service to Him. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama. Jnana sinehaiva vivriktana moha harim tad iha kathana shrutabhyam labdha smritir yati atipara madhvanaha. Then you can attain the transcendental realm. Now, Jadabharat understood that Rahugana, because he is not such a trained transcendentalist, he may not be able to grasp this point much. And this is this particular point. Which point I'm talking about? Detachment from matter. When we talk about the positive limbs of Krishna consciousness, yeah, you should chant, associate with devotees. That's not very difficult for us to understand. We may not be able to appreciate it so much because we don't have that realization, but at least it's not so difficult to understand. So what does detachment from matter actually mean? It is very important for a sadhaka who is very serious in the practice of spiritual life to cultivate spiritual detachment, and the basis of cultivation of spiritual detachment has to be necessarily not an artificial process, but an execution of the realization or an increasingly deeper understanding and appreciation of the point that material existence is miserable. So in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna explains to Arjuna, one of the divine qualities is Janma Mrityu Jara Vyadhi Dukkha Doshanu Darshanam. A person who can see the futility of material existence by understanding that material life is miserable because it is always associated with birth, old age, disease, and death. Repeatedly. Birth, old age, disease, death. Birth, old age, disease, death. Birth, old age, disease, death. Samsara. And this point is so very important. And we have discussed this multiple times. I'm just emphasizing this again because unless we become sufficiently convinced, at least intellectually to begin with, and actually any honest person who carefully reflects on the points which the Shastras say with respect to this, actually cannot deny. Any person who honestly asks himself, am I really happy? Unless he's preparing a Facebook post or a LinkedIn profile, then he will not be honest. But if he is honest to himself, he's talking to himself, he's looking at the mirror, nobody around and nobody shooting and recording. He just opens up to himself and asks himself this question. How happy am I? How satisfied am I? If one is honest, then the answer is obvious. As a part of the process of spiritual knowledge, these two types of knowledge, the Shastras say one should cultivate simultaneously. What is it? Understanding the miseries of material existence. And second, understanding the glories, name, form, qualities, and pastimes of the Supreme Personality of God. And the more we are convinced of the futility of material existence, the more our ability to take shelter of the Lord increases. Why? Simple, isn't it? When you lose hope in matter, you can transfer all your hope and all your effort towards Krishna. Otherwise, we are always half-hearted in devotion. Half-hearted. Half-hearted means, yeah, going to temple, I'm in association, I've identified myself as a devotee, so I have to do some things. But one is still very hopeful about material enjoyment. So Jadabharat wanted Maharaj Rahugana to understand this point very, very clearly, because he was a Brahman realized soul. He could see through very clearly about the futility of material existence. Self-realized souls, one of the characteristics, they can see through Maya very clearly. What is that Maya? This false illusion that I can be happy by enjoying matter. That I can happy by trying to be happy, independent of Krishna. They can see through the futility of material existence. They can see how the so-called happiness is actually in matter is actually a trap towards suffering. Adya anta vanta kaunteya nateshu ramate buddha. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita that they understand that these material happiness are not only insignificant, but they also have a beginning and an end. That's why those who are wise, they are not interested in delighting in these transient, insignificant pleasures, and in return, be affected with so much misery. They think it's a bad deal. Just like if I give you a sweet, it's very tasty. And just as you are about to eat, I said, no, but inside this is infected with germs which will give you cholera. You will immediately throw it away. You'll not say, oh, you'll say that, why just for a little bit pleasure of my tongue, I should be affected by cholera and I will suffer for weeks on end. Such terrible miseries. So an advanced spiritualist sees sense enjoyment like this. He sees Vishaya, sense objects, as Visha, poison. Why poison? It is the poison which kills the tendency to serve the Supreme Personality of God. Correct? Poison kills, right? What does the poison of Vishaya kill? It kills one's propensity to serve the Supreme Lord. And that's why those who are serious on the path of devotional service are careful to not indulge too much. Of course, it is never possible to have zero sense gratification. Because the very fact that we are in this world, there will be some sense enjoyment. You eat some nice prasad, obviously there is some sensation of taste, of taste, and there's some pleasure there. But one doesn't make sensory enjoyment the goal of one's life. So chapter 13, which we are discussing today, is the chapter where Maharaj Rahugana tries to explain, Chadabharat tries to explain to Maharaj Rahugana the predicament of the conditioned soul in this material world. And this is the predicament no matter whether one is poor, rich, king, beggar. Everyone from the lowest to the topmost is suffering. They're all going through this predicament. So to make him understand the predicament, Jadabharat gives a allegory. Remember, we had discussed the allegory of Puranjan, very elaborate allegory which we discussed for so many weeks. So this particular chapter is the description of an allegory through which Jadabharat tries to convey to, Jadabharat tries to convey to Maharaj Rahugana to convince him that actually his current position is actually a cause of misery for him, not actually the cause of his happiness. That is why he should give it up and sincerely take process of the shelter of the process of devotion. So he gives this allegory. And what is this allegory? This allegory is that of a merchant who enters into a dense forest, hoping to collect some riches, some precious items from the forest, so he can sell them, make some money and enjoy. The allegory of a merchant who goes to the forest to gather something so that he can sell them, make some money and enjoy. So through this allegory, he tries to explain to Maharaj Rahugana. Now, practically, this entire 13th chapter is the explanation of this allegory. At the end of the 13th chapter, Maharaj Rahugana understands from the allegory what is his situation and how he is entrapped, and he takes shelter of the lotus feet of Jadabharat and he says, thank you for making it abundantly clear how I am actually so trapped. 26 verses. This chapter is not very long. It is said by the end of this chapter, King Rahugana, who was the king of the Sauvira province, became completely aware of the constitutional position of the soul. And he gave up his bodily conception completely. Such a powerful analogy. And it has such a profound effect. And the credit doesn't just go to the analogy, because we will also use the analogy. But Shukadev Goswami, when he's talking, because he's narrating this pastime to Parikshit, he gives the credit of this untying of the knot of material existence to Jadabharat, because he says, because the king actually took shelter at the lotus feet of one of the pure servants of the Supreme Lord, he became disentangled. Again, this principle is very, very important. Whom we hear from is very important. So that which is very difficult to give up, for a king, give up is very, very difficult. Because he has so much that he needs to give up, and there's so much attachment because he has so much. For us, it is also difficult, but we don't have so much to give up. So actually, it's not so difficult, but it is still so difficult. Imagine how much more difficult for a king. But even such a king could give up because he heard from a pure devotee. So 13th chapter focuses on this. The 14th chapter, which is the concluding chapter of this pastime, is discussing about the same allegory. But in that chapter, this allegory is explained. Now the conversation between Maharaj Rahugana and Jadabharat has already ended. But at the end of this conversation, Parikshit Maharaj is asking Shukadev Goswami that Rahugana was smart enough to understand everything, but common people will not understand what this allegory means. Can you please decode the allegory of this whole explanation of this merchant going into the forest and how he was troubled in various ways? Can you explain what each of those aspects of that allegory actually mean? Because people may not be able to actually understand. Rahugana understood it, but people will not be able to understand. And Parikshit Maharaj explains, Shukdev Goswami explains to Parikshit Maharaj in chapter 14 the whole allegory, the actual meaning behind it. So in one sense, chapter 13 is the allegory, chapter 14 is the explanation of the allegory. So I thought that it is best that we discuss 13, 14 together. Because if I just discuss the allegory now and discuss the meanings later, then, you'll not be able to relate it. Just like we discussed the story of Puranjan, we mentioned a particular aspect of the allegory, we immediately gave what it means. Spiritually, what is the lesson? So if you're okay, we will discuss that side by side, chapter 13 and chapter 14. We'll probably need one more class to complete both 13 and 14 together, which means this class and one more class. And after we complete that, then we practically have completed this section. After that, there's a section which is speaking about the descendants of Maharaj Priyavrat, one chapter, and after that we go into the geography of the universe. Chapter 16 onwards, the description of Jambudvip. So chapter 15 is a wrap-up of the descendants of Maharaj Priyavrat. So the fifth canto, the first part of the fifth canto is about Priyavrata's descendants. The previous canto, fourth canto, spoke a lot about Uttanapad's descendants. And then we go into Jambudvip, the geography. And why with Priyavrat it goes into that? Because Priyavrat is the one who defined the geography of the Bhumandal, and we will discuss that past time when we come to it. So we will be focusing on 13 and 14 together, and I'll be cross-referencing across as we are discussing this past time. So one point to mention is this discussion is going to be quite philosophical. I will try to make it a bit light as far as possible, but it will be a bit intense in the sense that it is more of philosophy rather than story. So please bear and please listen attentively, because all these allegories, all these examples are ultimately not just the life story of Rahugana, but the life story of every conditioned soul, us included. So Rahugana understood. The question is whether we will understand at the end of this conversation. And we can understand if we have the same eagerness and surrender as what Rahugana had, because the message is still the same. So Jadabharat starts this pastime by describing that there was a merchant who entered a forest to acquire goods, because sometimes in forest, there are so many rare items which are only produced in the forest, so that he could take them, go out to the market, sell it, and in that way he can make some profit. But no matter how much this person went into this forest, the merchant, Jadabharat says he could never find happiness. So this is the summum bonum of the story. This is the first line itself. And why he couldn't find happiness, that is discussed in 20 other verses. But the bottom line is, this person was going into the forest repeatedly, trying to find happiness by getting goodies which he can sell and become happy, but he was never happy. So Shukadeva Goswami says, this merchant is akin to us, the conditioned soul. The conditioned soul enters the forest of material existence. Why material existence like a forest? Because material existence is such a challenging place to be. When we hear forest, we city dwellers sometimes think, oh wow, such a romantic place. So nice, nature and this and that. It's okay if you go to a forest resort and you are sitting in the resort in a 5-star wooden chalet and peeping out from your window and looking at nature, that's okay. But if you were to actually be placed in the middle of raw nature, we will freak out. Because forest is indeed a very tough, difficult, fearful, dangerous place to be. So the conditioned soul enters the forest of material existence. Why? Find happiness. Krishna bhuliya jiva bhogavancha kari. He forgets Krishna and goes into the forest of Maya, find happiness independent of Krishna. When he goes, enters the forest, what happens? Nikatastha Maya Tara Jhapatiya Dhari. That forest is the domain of Maya. It grabs him by the three modes and makes him suffer. It baffles, this Maya baffles the attempts of the conditioned soul to enjoy and makes him suffer in different ways, not just in one life, but life after life after life. As long as the living entity doesn't take shelter of a pure devotee, living entity continues struggle. Punarapi jananam, punarapi maranam, punarapi janani jathare shayanam. Until one takes shelter of the Lord through the shelter of his devotees, one cannot be released. This merchant, once he enters the forest, is said there are 6 plunderers who plunder him. So what is the analogy? There are 6 kind of dacoits who come and take away the wealth that this merchant may have. They rob him. Who are these 6? These are his 6 senses. Why 6? The 5 senses and the mind. Because whatever wealth he has acquired in this world, living entity, which should actually be used for dharma and for Krishna consciousness, these 5 senses and the mind continually attract him to spend all of that money on sense enjoyment. And not only they waste the money, but they also spoil the real purpose of human life. When the merchant is in the forest, jackals come and plunder the inattentive merchant. When the merchant is not careful, jackals are very sly animals. They don't make a lot of noise, but they will just sly way come and attack. So who's compared to the jackal? The Goswami says this jackal in the analogy are actually the close family members of the materialistic family. So in a materialistic family, and we are not talking here about a Krishna conscious family, in a materialistic family, actually each person is very self-centered. Husband, the wife, the children, everybody is thinking about how in this situation I can maximize my happiness. Doesn't matter even if others become miserable. So they are always thinking of how to take away the wealth from this merchant, this man of the family. So many times, so many parents complain, oh, not earning so much, but my children spend so much. They go on insisting, they want this, they want that. And I'm working so hard, but they are sucking away my blood in the form of their unlimited demands. Then, the analogy, it is said, there are dense bowers. Bowers means clusters of plants which are composed of thick bushes, grass, and creepers. So forest, especially if you look at, we are in Malaysia, many of us, Malaysian forests are equatorial forests. Equatorial forests are generally impenetrable. Penetrable means you cannot just go and walk around in the forest. It's just so thick. Even if you cut them down, the next time you come back to the forest, even after 1 week, whole thicket would have grown back and again it would have been very dense. So material life is like that. especially this whole network of fruitive activities in Grihastha ashram, or rather Griha Medhi life, to be more precise, materialistic householder life, is such that a person is so busy with fruitive activities trying to enjoy his family life. But that desire to enjoy material life, sometimes it seems to go away, but actually it never goes away. Again and again, it grows back. It grows back. It grows back. What that means is material desire cannot be satiated by fulfilling it. This is another big illusion. This is something which the scriptures say again and again and again. Some people think, oh, if I just enjoy, then my material desire will go away. After that, I'll be all ready for spiritual life. But Vairagya doesn't come just by material enjoyment. Because the nature of material consciousness and greed is when you get, you want more. You want more. There's no end to it. Without spiritual knowledge, one will not have that insight to understand the futility of material existence. So it's very important to burn this desire, the seeds of this desire for material enjoyment at the root, which is possible through proper transcendental knowledge in the association of devotees. Otherwise, the thicket will keep growing again and again and again. No matter what religious activities, what austerities, what dan, what tapasya one does, may temporarily be purified. Again and again, the same things will grow because the materialistic tendencies will. And while one is in this bowers, this merchant who's in this bowers, he is repeatedly bitten by mosquitoes. Any one of you who has, even in Malaysia, been to treks in forests, in Taman Negara or other places, you will generally know that one of the things you need to be worried about is so many insects. There are leeches, there are mosquitoes, and of course many much more dangerous also, snakes and scorpions also sometimes, especially mosquitoes. So this merchant is attacked continuously by these mosquitoes. Who are these mosquitoes? These mosquitoes are akin to low-class people or thieves who are continuously harassing this person. Correct, isn't it? If you look at our own lives, there are so many people and character, whether it's where we are staying, at our workplace, or wherever we go to, even in the bus we sit, in the train we sit, will harass us in so many ways. So unreasonable, envious, irritable. So material nature is like that. When you are in the society, you cannot escape from the mosquitoes in the society. And Shukdev Goswami says, not only there are mosquitoes, there are also people who are like locusts and vultures and rats. We always come across such people. How is he like this? How irritable. When we see them also from a distance, we want to change, our lane. I don't even want to meet and talk to. Sometimes this merchant, he sees an imaginary palace, Gandharvapura. What does this imaginary palace mean? That this conditioned soul who's in the forest of material enjoyment sometimes imagines that, yes, I will attain some lasting great position in this world by which I can really enjoy. I'll have a lot of wealth, I'll have a lot of comfort, I will have a lot of good association with the opposite sex, and I will enjoy wealth, power, control women. But this kind of imaginative palace doesn't exist. So you may say, oh, what do you mean Prabhu doesn't exist? There are so many people who are rich, successful, and have beautiful women. No, we are not talking about that doesn't exist means that you cannot achieve these things. That doesn't exist means that even if you get that thing, you will not get the happiness that you thought you will get when you have these things. That is the illusion. The illusion is that seems to be, oh, this situation will make me happy. But when you reach there, it's like a mirage. Mirage disappears. And one starts wondering, oh, what happened? I thought this will be such a. Once I achieve this, once I get this job, once my children are educated, once my loan is paid off, once, whatever we say that once, that ideal situation. Once I set up my company, once it becomes a $10 million company, $20 million company, whatever we have set for ourselves. We are hoping against hope that once we reach there, it will all be set. Once we reach there, we realize, oh, I don't feel at all what I thought I will feel when I get there. Yes, of course, momentarily there may be exhilaration on some success. But once the exhilaration fades away, and then when the reality dawns, realizes actually bigger success, bigger positions are bigger struggle, bigger misery, bigger anxiety. These are not positions of enjoyment and rest, but these are positions of continuous struggle. Jada Bharat continues, he says, sometimes in this forest, the merchant may see a glowing ghost. That ghost looks like a meteor. Meteor means a dhumaketu just passing by. So what is the analogy of this ghost who looks like a meteor? Sukdev Goswami says that a living entity is attracted by gold. It's very attractive. And he runs after it. Why? Because gold is the essence of material possession. It is the source of opulence, and because it's the source of opulence, is also the source of envy. If you have it and somebody else doesn't have it, they will be envious for you. People in Rajoguna especially are very attracted to gold. The scriptures in many places say Kanchana and Kamini. Materialistic people, especially those who are in Rajoguna, are attracted by these two things. Kanchan means gold, and Kamini means woman. They will do this gold. And the intelligence of this merchant is so victimized by his home, his wealth, his relatives, and so forth, that he's continuously running from one place to another, search for success. The conditions was continuously struggling, hoping against hope to gather riches and aspiring to create a comfortable situation for himself to maintain his body. He continues to struggle endlessly. Chadabharat says, sometimes the eyes of this merchant are covered by the dust of a whirlwind. Sometimes in the forest there are whirlwinds and then you cannot see anything. You cannot understand what to do, where to go, because there's so much dust. It becomes quite dangerous. What is this dust? What is this whirlwind? These whirlwinds are the disturbing, lusty desires that erupt in the heart of the conditions. When these materialistic desires come in the heart of the living entity, what happens? They're like a whirlwind, a dust whirlwind. What does a whirlwind do? It doesn't allow you to see things clearly. Lust, which is followed by greed and anger, similarly clouds the vision of the conditioned soul. It cannot clearly think, it cannot clearly understand that what he thinks will lead to auspiciousness actually is going to lead him to inauspiciousness. And that's why he breaks the rules of proper behavior and tries to enjoy material life in improper ways. And all this impropriety is punished by the laws of material nature, and he simply suffers. He doesn't understand that. He thinks, oh, I can do anything and get away with it. But the demigods are all witnessing everything that a person is doing, and they punish him in the course of it. Jadbharat says, sometimes when he is in the forest, the merchant runs to a mirage, thinking that it is water. In a forest, you don't know where there is water. You have to look for a proper water body. Sometimes from a distance, it may appear that there is water there, so he runs there only to find that there is none. This is again another example that, oh, I will be happy if I get this. So we have discussed this already. You go there and find out, or it's not as wonderful as, correct? Like students, right? We are all students. At least I went through this. I just want to finish my 10th standard exam. After that, I get good marks. My life is set. Because if I get my 10th standard good marks, I'll get admission in good college and the rest will be fine. 10th standard one thinks, oh, I need to give 12th standard exam also. And that becomes the next obstacle. Oh, if I just do this, then I'll get admission in a good college, engineering, medical, whatever. And then my life will be set. And if at all one overcomes that obstacle successfully, then one realizes, oh, wealth was so much easier. Now this engineering degree, medical degree, so much more hard work. Then that obstacle, if one surmounts, and after I become doctor, life will be wonderful. There's one thing which everybody says. So far, I haven't found a person who doesn't say this. They always say that life as a student was better than life working outside. Student life was so nice. Of course, there's trouble, but they thought when I get to work, it will be so much better because I have money. And they realize, no, there is money, but there is also. So this is what we are talking about, the futility. So one after another, one, that is the mirage. Oh, I get this, I'll be happy. Oh, now I should get this. No, reaches there, oh, that is also a mirage. Then one goes elsewhere, that is also a mirage. Because one remains entrapped in a material consciousness, one continues hope against hope against hope to try to find happiness because he doesn't know anything better. Jadbharat continues this. Sometimes this man, as he's roaming in the forest, try to find some valuable things. He's very pained in his heart. He becomes scared because he sometimes hears the sound of owls. Now, I cannot imitate an owl. You can Google and see how an owl sounds like. When you're in a forest and you hear the sound of an owl, it can be quite scary. Or even the sound of crickets who are invisible. They make a very irritating, disturbing sound. The Goswami says that these sounds are the sounds of his enemies, chastisements of enemies and government servants, chastising with harsh words. And these kind of harsh words actually make him very, very sad. Sometimes this merchant takes shelter of impious trees. The scriptures it is said, impious trees are trees which don't have flowers or fruits. So what are these impious trees compared to? Sukadeva Goswami says that when one becomes depleted of one's own good karma and loses all opulence, one takes shelter of other wealthy men, hoping that he'll get some benefit. And such people, because they are themselves very selfish, is actually a hopeless case because they will get nothing. They are like impious trees. Sometimes this merchant jumps into a shallow river and becomes frustrated. Sometimes if you enter into a river and you realize that the river is very shallow, then you cannot really do anything. For example, even if you want to do a boating in a river, if the stream is too shallow, you cannot even do boating because as soon as you sit in the boat will touch the riverbed. So you need some depth in the river to be able to do something. So this shallowness of the river is compared to the conditioned soul trying to get relief from the miseries of material existence by taking shelter of false gurus. He tries to get cheap blessings by false gurus who are not actually devotees of the Lord or not advanced transcendentalists, either from atheists or from the pseudo gurus. Their association, he actually becomes more bewildered rather than becoming auspicious. The merchant sometimes begs food from others. Sukadeva Goswami says, begs food for others means that when becomes deprived of food for his own maintenance, he will the extent of exploiting his own father or his own son. The merchant sometimes suffers from the burning heat of a forest fire. So as the merchant is roaming in the forest, sometimes there's a forest fire. There's such intense heat and the merchant suffers. This, in fact, whole material existence is compared to forest fire. Correct? Anybody remembers which song, which Vaishnava song mentions this? That material existence is a forest fire.
Prabhu, the what? Samsara Davara.
Yeah, the Mangalarti. Samsara Dava Nalalita Loka. Thank you, Prabhu. So the spiritual master has come to extinguish the forest fire of material existence. So materialistic family life is compared to the burning forest fire because there is no hope. There is misery everywhere. Because the person is burned by the fire of lamentation. And he condemns himself as being unfortunate and impious. Mera to naseeb phut gaya. Conditioned soul, has this mentality that he always thinks, oh, I am so, even though he may act as if he's great, but he inside be thinking, oh, I'm also unfortunate. Oh, that person is so fortunate. He got this, he got that, I didn't get this, I want it. So continuously they are lamenting. Then the merchant sometimes becomes sad because his wealth is plundered by yakshas. So who are these yakshas? Goswami says the government officials, the tax man. He's like the yaksha. Sometimes in the form of tax, some countries are like 40%, 50% tax on the income. But sometimes even if the tax may not be so much, sometimes the government will come and forcefully take away your property under various pretexts. And then the person becomes very morose and appears totally discouraged. Chadbharat says, sometimes the merchant imagines a palatial city, enters that palatial city with his family, and he enjoys for a moment as if he's satisfied. Sometimes he wants to climb mountains, but his feet become pierced by thorns. Now, this is very interesting. He wants to climb mountains, but his feet become pierced by thorns. Shukdev Goswami says, climbing mountains is like trying to do big yajnas and ceremonies, karma kanda. But even performing of karma kanda is actually so much troublesome. It's not only very expensive, it is so cumbersome to do some of these elaborate yajnas. So that also becomes so much of a hassle for him to execute. Overcome by hunger, he becomes angry at his family members. I think this is quite clear. I mean, it's the same meaning. And this is the nature of material life. A dissatisfied material life, which is focused on sense gratification, you can see that within the family members, there's so much of harsh language, harsh words, people fighting with each other, being rude to each other. It's very hard in today's Kali Yuga to find a very loving family, where all the members of the family have a lot of love and affection amongst themselves and have a genuine service attitude towards each other. It's very rare. And it's rare even amongst devotees. Sadhakas I'm talking about. When I say devotees, I'm talking about sadhakas. Not siddhas, about those who are perfected souls, what to speak about them. And the secret to have a happy family life is to keep Krishna in the center. Because if we keep each of our own individual egos in the center and we are all trying to please ourselves, then it is always going to be an environment of discord, argument, and there'll be so much of anger and frustration. The merchant is swallowed by a python. I'll just take 2 more minutes and we'll end. The merchant is swallowed by a python and loses his consciousness. So this being swallowed by a python is compared to a person who goes to sleep, because when one goes into sleep, one is deeply absorbed in the mode of ignorance and he cannot understand what is going on in his life. Sometimes poisonous snakes bite him. Sometimes he falls into the dark well of hellish life. So envious enemies are compared to snakes. Sometimes there are people who pretend to be your friends, but actually are envious enemies. It is better to have a straight enemy than a crooked friend. So unable to sleep properly because of having such envious enemies, one becomes very troubled at heart. The last point for today. Sometimes he goes to take honey because the merchant wants to gather precious articles. Honey is one of the precious articles from the forest. He goes to a beehive to take money, but he's bitten by the bees and he's stung and he's harassed. What is this? The analogy that attracted by the desire for happiness, the honey, real life. For some, money is honey. And for some, the woman is honey. That's why sometimes they'll call the woman honey. Oh, hi, honey. And the woman will call the man honey. Honey means so sweet, I'm going to enjoy. It's so nice, it's so tasty. When you go to taste, what happens? They don't realize surrounded by bees. You should come and sting. A bee sting is quite painful. And if bees attack you in a swarm, then you had it. So when you try to steal somebody's property, because when you try to take honey, actually you're taking the honey, you're stealing the honey from the bees with a desire for some little happiness. So in this way, one tries to snatch happiness either through illicit sex or by stealing another person's property. Either the laws of karma or the government officials will catch you or the ladies' relatives or the husbands will catch you and beat you up nicely. You get into so many miseries. That's the explanation. And that is why those who are wise, they condemn the materialistic path. Just for little happiness, one gets so many encumbrances and actually creates more misery for himself. Sometimes the misery may not come immediately in this life. Sometimes it may come for many, many lifetimes to come. But one must be convinced that if one violates the principles of dharma, one will suffer so much more than what one has enjoyed. So we are kind of midway through the chapter. So I think it's a good time to pause. And we'll continue. And hopefully, Krishna will conclude this chapter. So very quickly, just to summarize, this whole analogy which Jadabhara is explaining to Maharaj Rahugana by giving this example of this merchant entering this forest to get some goodies, to get some happiness, is the state of the conditioned soul who's in this forest of material existence trying to find happiness independent of Krishna. But he's getting everything else but happiness. So some of us may say, oh, but there is also some happiness. Yes, the happiness in material existence, the great souls say, is actually the bait to trap us into suffering. You understand the bait? For example, when somebody is fishing, what they do? To catch the fish will not come and hang to the hook. No? The fish will not say, oh, the fisherman has come. I have to go. He has put a hook, so let me put the hook here so he can take me out. Who's going to think like that? So the fisherman has to trick the fish into getting stuck in the hook. How does he do that? It's a small worm, the tip of the hook. And the fish comes not attracted to the hook. He doesn't see the hook, but sees the worm, tries to eat the worm, gets stuck in the hook. So for the pleasure of eating a small worm, he gets stabbed by the hook and he's pulled out of the water and killed and cooked and eaten. That is the nature of material happiness. Anyway, so these are very profound, deep things. So we are all in the process of trying to realize the subject matters, because I cannot claim that I have fully understood this. But of course, as time passes in Krishna consciousness, as our heart gets more and more purified, we'll be able to increasingly appreciate these aspects, because one becomes more and more detached from matter, more and more attracted to Krishna as one becomes more and more purified. So this is a good subject matter for contemplation for the sadhakas. Because more than attraction for Krishna, for us at our level, of course, one has to cultivate both side by side, but for most of us, the impetus for spiritual life is the realization of the forest fire of material existence. I'm burning, burning, suffering, suffering. So much trouble, so much trouble. How can I escape from this? Then they see spiritual life as an alternative to transcend this and go beyond the cycle of birth. So anyway, I'll pause here. I don't want to say more. So we'll continue this discussion and hopefully complete the chapter now next Saturday. I'm opening up the floor if there is any questions or comments. I hope it was not too boring. I tried to make it a bit interesting, but if you think it is boring, let me know, then I'll run through it much faster the next class. And you can tell me honestly, I'll not feel offended. Because the subject matter is indeed very technical. Any comments, any questions? Wonderful.
I think overall class, Prabhuji, I think it's very in detail, very pragmatic, very
Just in a,
practical examples, and it's easy to connect. The last one, what you said about like the fish and the hook and a small one. I think that's something like um, it's very understanding actually. It's very difficult to identify sometimes, but we need to carefully look into certain things and stay away from it. I think that's very, I think classic example. I think we should remember, I think forever, just to keep out of silly things which might like impact in our like spiritual journey.
true, true. Thank you. Yes. So that itself is Maya. Maya, which promises some happiness, but in return gives so much more pain.
True, Prabhu. Prabhuji,
Thank you,
one more
Prabhu.
question I have,
Yeah.
Prabhu. Like, see, when we say we need to be cautious about a materialistic world, Maya and all, in today's technology world, like everything has become materialistic. Day in, day out, we are associated with like so much of like a material things, right? I think sometimes it might be very difficult to like like a disconnect from the materialistic thing, but how to step by step come out of it. I know it's very difficult to like straight away like say okay, I'll just cut myself from the materialistic thing, and I try to like connect as much as spirituality. But in practical thing, like, I think in my opinion it might not be easy, but step by step it is definitely possible. Any advice on that part, Prabhuji? Which is the best way to start with actually?
The best way is actually already just given in the last verse of the previous chapter. The best way is avoid intimate association with materialistic people and to have regular association with devotees. So what we want to avoid is intimate association with materialistic people. Of course, we are all in staying in town. We are working in corporates. We will always come across people in our professional lives or in our social lives, people who do not share spiritual values. So that is natural. So we cannot expect, because that is the we are in Kali Yuga, and that too in a part of Kali Yuga where the society is rapidly degrading. But what we can at least try to do, and this is the advice across various scriptures and by various sadhus as well, that we should interact with the world to the degree needed for executing our uh, basic activities. Means we do our job, whatever needs to be done, whatever interaction. We do not become intimate and close and share our heart and become too close to those who are materialistic, because the moment we come too close to them, then we partake of their material consciousness. If you are sitting in a meeting room with 3-4 others and discussing our professional project work or any other thing, then that is not materialistic association. Materialistic association is when we are sitting together with them, having a meal together and discussing some gossip and materialistic things. So one has to be careful to draw the line, to know, and that requires some experience, some maturity to know where to draw the line. Because of course, in certain situations, you even have to be with them over, maybe an official lunch or whatever. But the point is that one should know where to draw the line between opening up one's heart. Once one opens up one's heart to a materialistic person, one actually risks infection. And the second aspect is, in order to genuinely remain protected, this itself is not easy to genuinely remain protected. It is very important to do two things. One is regularly associate those who are spiritually strong, that will charge our battery, and also regularly have very strong sadhana, especially chant the holy names, read Gita, Bhagavad, especially if we can, chant at least some rounds, not all, in the morning, and read a little bit before one goes about doing one's daily duties at workplace. Then one will find that one's ability to remain uninfected, it's like a vaccine. One has to keep taking the vaccine every day. One becomes much more immune to the infection of material energy. So the process is everywhere the same. because we want to be fully cured. The system of becoming cured is take medicine regularly and don't expose yourself to agents of contamination repeatedly. Because if you are taking in, you're trying to cure, but you're again and again exposing yourself to the same virus, how are you going to get cured? So that is the very logical principle. So this is how we do it practically at a high level. Those finer aspects we can always, very specific scenarios we can always discuss one-on-one. But that is the broad mechanism. And the thing is, because we are all social beings, we all need to be together, to eat with friends, to sing with friends, to spend time with friends. So we have to replace materialistic association with devotee association, so that we do not feel that social vacuum. Because the moment there is a vacuum, automatically, if it is not filled by Krishna, it will be filled by Maya. Yeah? Vinod,
Yes,
does that
Prabhuji.
help you?
Yes. Very helpful, Prabhuji. Very detailed answer. Thanks a lot, Prabhuji. Thank you.
Thank you, Vinod. Anything else? Great, wonderful. So thank you all very much. It's around 10:15 now. Grantha Srimad Bhagavatam ki Jai, Shri Prabhupada ki Jai, Samaved Gaur Bhakta. I'll see you all on Wednesday for our Chaitanya Charitamrita discussion. Hari Hari, thank you very much.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Krishna Prabhuji.
Thank you.
Hare
Thank
Krishna,
you,
thank
Sridevi
you,
ji.
Prabhuji.
Thank you,
Thank you, Indulekha Mataji. Ashwin, Haribo. Ashwin's mustache is growing every time I see him, it's longer. He's become a lad now, he's no longer a boy. Good, good. Thank you, Ashwin, for keeping your enthusiasm.
Thank you,
Here. Yes, Nehaji, thank you. Suraj, Shalini, thank you. Charan Lakshmi Mataji, Indulekha Mataji,
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Haribol, Rishi and Shiniji, Hare Krishna, Archana ji. Thank you all so much. Always grateful for tolerating me and assembling every Wednesday and Saturday. Thank you. I'll see you all soon. So have a good weekend, whatever is